My name is Patty, and I go by a website. Well, I don't go by a website. I have a website called Natural Law Health that will most likely be revamped relatively soon. Um, and I do a couple of things. I teach anatomy and physiology at a college. I work as a naturopath offering health consultations. I do a lot of different things. And today I would like to talk about the brain, as you see on the image here. And this is one of the images I showed to my students. We're going to look at the brain, and we're going to discuss some of the esoteric or more less discussed, I should say, topics when it comes to the brain. Now, a lot of what I share with my students when I talk about brain anatomy and physiology is just the pure mechanistic science, totally materialistic. When we look at, connecting this to like Rudolf Steiner, for instance, Rudolf Steiner talks about Ahriman and Lucifer being the entities that will and had incarnated on this planet. Lucifer being about 3,000 years on the planet before Christ. And Lucifer was very much into unrestrained, if you will, right hemisphere types of ideology. Very not logical at all, just kind of very, think of, if you will, like the talking in tongues in some of the Christian traditions, where they just kind of yell out various words and whatnot. But yeah, Lucifer, which some people equate with the devil or Satan. I don't think that's necessarily true. Lucifer, according to Steiner, incarnated on the planet about 3,000 years before Christ. And it was thought that his physical presence in the body that he was inhabiting was in the Asian kind of countries in the East. And then Christ came, in the Middle East, or in the middle of, the East and the West, which is, as we know, the area of Israel, Jerusalem, Galilee, all of the places they make note of in the Bible. And then Ahriman is coming in the future. Okay, Ahriman is coming in the future. And Ahriman brings with his incarnation much of what we see in our reality today. And that is education, society, all very much entrained and worshiping scientism. This mechanistic view of life with the spirit removed, life with the spirit ignored. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how this relates to our discussion of the brain. So here we're looking at a lateral view of the brain. The largest part of the human brain is the cerebrum. You can see that all right here. I'm scrolling my little mouse around that. Our cerebrum actually has 5 lobes. 4 of them can be seen. Frontal lobe, parietal lobe. Those 2 lobes separated by what is called the central sulcus. A sulcus is a little groove separating the gyri, the folds in the brain. Our frontal lobe is really the thinking part of our brain, if you will. It's where most of the higher levels of brain processes like social judgment and personality. It also is the area of the brain that controls all of our muscles. Behind that, the parietal lobe, which deals more with sensations. On the lateral sides of the brain, you can see here the temporal lobe deals with hearing, and other functions. And then the occipital lobe is our visual center. So that's just a little overview of the brain. Let's look at another view of the brain here. Let me show you this view. This is a superior view looking down onto the brain. You can see that our brain has 2 cerebral hemispheres, a right and a left cerebral hemisphere. And separating those 2 hemispheres of the cerebrum, again, the largest part of the human brain, is a very deep groove called the longitudinal fissure. And for the most part, our two cerebral hemispheres act very different from one another. They look like mirror images of one another. I mean, the right and left hemisphere look like, they should do the same thing, but they really don't. They have drastically different functions. Now, in our body, in our brain, the two hemispheres do communicate because there is a band of white axonal fibers. Let me show you in a mid-sagittal view of a real human brain. Let's go up here. So this is a mid-sectional view of the human brain. And see this little band right here? This is called the corpus callosum. It is made up of axonal nerve fibers that span across and connect the two cerebral hemispheres. And that allows these two hemispheres to communicate. But I will tell you, humans, because of modern education, have been very much programmed, and I've mentioned in previous live streams, and Mark Passio has said this as well, that humans are a programmable species, and much of the programming that we take in the form of television, internet, education, it is to keep us in our left cerebral hemisphere. The left hemisphere is a lot different than the right hemisphere, as I'm about to get into. And so we can tap into that right hemisphere. We can communicate with it. We have access to do so because of the corpus callosum. There are some interesting things that can happen in the brain. If you've ever taken psychology classes, you might have maybe watched videos of people that have had different types of brain damage. Like, for instance, there are disorders where, a certain type of brain damage would cause a person to only, like a man to only shave one half of his face or whatnot. The corpus callosum, and I don't know if this is still practiced today, but the corpus callosum used to be and could still be cut in people that have severe seizures. And this had been a treatment to help to mitigate or stop the seizures. What they would do is they would cut the corpus callosum so that there were no communication spots connecting the right and left hemispheres. And what's interesting is that when you cut the corpus callosum, the right half of the brain cannot communicate with the left half of the brain. Now, the left half of our brain, our left cerebral hemisphere, is where, for 95% of the humans on this planet, where our language centers are. So this is another reason why the left hemisphere is so dominant, because our language centers are associated with the left hemisphere. There are about 5% of humans on the planet that have their language centers in the right hemisphere. And that means this is the hemisphere by which we, communicate. Language is both taking in information, writing it out, speaking, understanding what somebody is telling you or speaking to you. Those are your language centers. There are two that I usually discuss with my students. One is Broca's area, which is more of the speaking aspect of language. And then Wernicke's area is more of the understanding language. And people that can have language disorders, if either of those centers, usually again on the left hemisphere, if either of them are damaged, that is called aphasia. So types of aphasia could include somebody not having too many words to choose from when they're trying to articulate or speak. So their language is kind of limited to 5 words. And it's very frustrating for those individuals because, they can have in their mind a full spectrum of vocabulary terms to get their point across, but they verbally cannot express it because of damage to the Broca's area. Damage to Wernicke's area, in the way of a stroke or any kind of lesion, that causes what we call non-fluent aphasia, where the patient just talks excessively and just jumbles many words together, but their communication makes very little sense. So again, aphasia, very interesting type of brain disorder. But because our language centers are in the left hemisphere, that's the center we tend to spend more of our time on. I mean, think about in education, what are the main types of classes that we share with little kids, with children that are in grade school, other than, learning about gender, which is now what they want to do. And I am not opposed to children, getting into that, but I think it's a little premature in my opinion, and I think there are better things to teach our children. I would, switch that with maybe gardening skills and life skills, because we need to be a little bit more self-sufficient, but I do not want to digress at this point. But, think about what traditionally we have taught children in grade school: reading, writing, and arithmetic. Those are all left hemisphere dominant types of studies. Language, obviously, like I said, because our language centers are in the left hemisphere, and, math skills, even science to some extent, the type of science where you're dissecting and, look at this image. Here we're looking at the brain. There are two ways you can look at the brain, either from a left hemisphere perspective or a right hemisphere perspective. The left hemisphere perspective is looking at the brain and identifying all of the components, like the cerebellum, the brainstem, which is made up of the medulla oblongata, the pons, the midbrain. Looking at the diencephalon, which is made up of your thalamus, your hypothalamus, and your pineal gland. Here you can see again the corpus callosum connecting the two cerebral hemispheres and dividing those cerebral hemispheres into an occipital lobe, a parietal lobe, a frontal lobe, and there you can see a little bit of the temporal lobe. That's all left brain. Taking it apart, dissecting it, that's what we do in anatomy classes. You dissect the human body. When I was in medical school, I dissected a human cadaver and identified all of the little parts, and everything has a name. Everything is identified by a name. That is left hemisphere. What would right hemisphere do? Right hemisphere would look at this brain and maybe compare it to something. And by the way, a real human brain that is in a skull and alive would not look like this. It would not hold together like this. A real human brain, as I described to my students, because when I was in medical school, I did rotations in the emergency room, and I've seen patients come in with their skulls cracked open, and the brain matter would fall out of the broken, cracked open skull, much like gray slime. Gray, sloppy, gelatinous slime just kind of falling out of the hole in the brain, or the cracked open space. So the best way I can describe a real living human brain is if you take cellophane and fill it with toothpaste. It's that malleable. A real human brain is very malleable. To make the brain look like this, you have to preserve it in something like formalin, which hardens the tissue. So, this makes it easy to identify the parts of the brain, obviously, and to cut it in half in a nice way. And when students, at my college, when they're doing dissections, or medical students are in a human cadaver lab cutting open the human body, it's not in its natural form. It's in a very unnatural form. So, that's left brain. But right brain, right hemisphere would look at this, or even a real human brain, and just kind of sense it, feel it. I wouldn't recommend touching a real human brain, Not that I am a 100% on board with the germ theory of disease. I'm more of a terrain theory, if you will. But, there are certain prion diseases that are associated with, touching brain parts and eating brain parts, especially of your own species. But anywho, the right hemisphere is more holistic. It's taking in the big picture, not dissecting it into little parts, but looking at the whole, looking at this whole image of the brain and comparing it to maybe cauliflower or noodles, something like this that is just holistic. And usually, you're not even verbally describing it. You're just taking it in and appreciating it. Because if you start, adding vocabulary terms and terminology, that's very left brain. Right brain lives in a totally different reality. Okay, it's totally more sensory experience, taking in just the wondrous beauty of this moment in time. It's very much in the center of focus. And I've got another image to share with you about this. So let's jump ahead in this lecture that I share with my students. Oops, I think I passed it up. So here's a look at the two hemispheres of our cerebrum. Left hemisphere, again, usually containing the language centers. Math is very much prominent in the left hemisphere. Speech centers, writing, which is part of language. And then the right hemisphere is more sensory, spatial, recognizing faces, noticing something that makes, familiar to you, that familiar feel. Instead of, trying to analyze something by identifying it, how does it make you feel? That's more right hemisphere. And because, these signals, as they pass up and down our brain to our body, a lot of the axonal fibers carried by these neurons, they cross over to the opposite side of the brain. So they undergo what we call decussation. And so the left hemisphere controls the right side of your body for the most part, and the right hemisphere controls the left side of the body. So not always, but often, people that are right hemisphere dominant, they tend to be left-handed, and left hemisphere dominant individuals tend to be right-handed. But there are exceptions to that. But you do see that quite a bit. People that are left-handed tend to be very artistic. They tend to, I've noticed that anyway, because in addition to me being a scientist, I have also been a musician. I've been in 4 different bands. And in that field, during that time in my life, I noticed that a lot of the musicians I would interact with, a lot of them were left-handed. And it was always kind of frustrating because they had left-handed guitars, and not all of them. I had friends that were left-handed and they could play right-handed guitars. But as a right-handed individual, I always had the normal right-handed guitars, and I didn't know what to do with the left-handed guitar, to be honest with you. I wasn't that great of a guitar player, but I could strum some notes and whatnot. And that is, music is something to help balance that overly scientific left brain programming that I had been raised in. So why am I sharing all of this with you? Well, we're going to talk a little bit about humans being programmable, but let me come down to the bottom here because I added a few things about the brain. So mind control. What is government? I've shared this, not this image that you're looking at right now, but I've shared what the term government means when you break down the parts of that word from what it's derived from. So to govern comes from the Latin word gubernare, which means to control. And then ment, like mental, that means the mind. So government is mind control. But when you look at this image, it's connecting government with the left hemisphere, which again is what is indoctrinating the young children to focus on reading, writing, and arithmetic. Those left hemisphere types of modalities, really strengthening the left hemisphere quite a bit. And it creates an imbalance when we're only focusing on the left hemisphere, which is what they do in public indoctrination school, modern education. Those are what's highlighted. I mean, think about, when I was in grade school, even from a young age, I remember them getting me ready and getting my classmates ready for all of those standardized exams. And doing all of those little, reading a little and then answering some questions or answering these math questions. I mean, I think what they do with those standardized exams, now that I'm older and I reflect upon it, is I think they try to determine who they can groom to become the most, if they can make them obedient, the most obedient psychopathic governmental official. That's what they're fishing for. I mean, they have all of these humans that they feel like they have to control because that's what they're doing to us. They're controlling us. And now they think they have too many of us, right? So they're trying to get rid of some of us. And we've talked about how, right? I mean, if you're aware of what's going on, you know that those in control are not our friends. But when you're too much imbalanced, out of balance, and the right and left hemispheres are not, in a nice, even keel, let's just read this little verbiage here. The left brain imbalance eventually creates psychopathic tendencies, leading some to the belief that they have a right to rule over others through violence. Isn't that interesting? All right, so can you have a right brain imbalanced? And like I said, that Luciferic type of time period, 3,000 years before Christ, when Lucifer was on the planet, Lucifer, I believe, was more right brain imbalanced. And that today is expressed as a religious kind of focus. So right brain imbalance creates blind acceptance and collectivist groupthink, leading to a condition in which willing followers will readily submit to authority. So we have both of these going on, and being imbalanced in one or the other is not healthy. So, this is another slide. A lot of these come from Mark Passio's work. But the neocortex is the outer layer of gray matter of our cerebrum. And that's where we have a lot of these cell bodies. It's gray because it's not myelinated for the most part. And it's where the cell bodies are, the working part of the neurons, are all aggregated. And the two hemispheres, again, are different from one another. The left hemisphere, again, more logical and scientific, whereas the right hemisphere, more creative, and even compassionate. So, I want to share with you, if I can, we're going to watch a video, okay? And I actually share this video with my students at the college I teach at. A lot of times I don't have time, but when I do have time, I have my students watch this video, and it's a quite interesting video from a woman who is a brain scientist, if you will, a neuroscientist. And as a neuroscientist, she suffered a stroke. And she explains her perception of the stroke through, a scientist. But she had to experience it with that half of her brain because the stroke was actually affecting her left hemisphere, where her language centers are, where her logical mind is, the mind that she uses more imbalanced and more heavily as a, mechanistic, materialistic scientist. And this experience of a stroke, because it was forcing her to rely on her right hemisphere to get by until she was able to recover, it really changed her perspective on who we are as humans. So we're going to watch this video. I find it quite interesting. We're going to watch the whole thing because I think it's that important. And then we'll discuss a little bit afterwards.
I grew up to study the brain because I have a brother who has been diagnosed with a brain disorder, schizophrenia. And as a sister and later as a scientist, I wanted to understand, why is it that I can take my dreams, I can connect them to my reality, and I can make my dreams come true? What is it about my brother's brain and his schizophrenia that he cannot connect his dreams to a common and shared reality, so they instead become delusion? So I dedicated my career to research into the severe mental illnesses. And I moved from my home state of Indiana to Boston, where I was working in the lab of Dr. Francine Bennis in the Harvard Department of Psychiatry. And in the lab, we were asking the question, what are the biological differences between the brains of individuals who would be diagnosed as normal control as compared with the brains of individuals diagnosed with schizophrenia, schizoaffective, or bipolar disorder? So we were essentially mapping the microcircuitry of the brain, which cells are communicating with which cells, with which chemicals, and then in what quantities of those chemicals. So there was a lot of meaning in my life because I was performing this type of research during the day, but then in the evenings and on the weekends, I traveled as an advocate for NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. But on the morning of December 10, 1996, I woke up to discover that I had a brain disorder of my own. A blood vessel exploded in the left half of my brain. And in the course of 4 hours, I watched my brain completely deteriorate in its ability to process all information. On the morning of the hemorrhage, I could not walk, talk, read, write, or recall any of my life. I essentially became an infant in a woman's body. If you've ever seen a human brain, it's obvious that the two hemispheres are completely separate from one another. And I have brought for you a real human brain. Thank you. So this is a real human brain. This is the front of the brain, the back of the brain with the spinal cord hanging down. And this is how it would be positioned inside of my head. And when you look at the brain, it's obvious that the two cerebral cortices are completely separate from one another. For those of you who understand computers, our right hemisphere functions like a parallel processor, while our left hemisphere functions like a serial processor. The two hemispheres do communicate with one another through the corpus callosum, which is made up of some 300 million axonal fibers. But other than that, the two hemispheres are completely separate. Because they process information differently, each of our hemispheres think about different things, they care about different things, and dare I say, they have very different personalities. Excuse me. Thank you. It's been a joy. Our right human hemisphere is all about this present moment. It's all about right here, right now. Our right hemisphere, it thinks in pictures, and it learns kinesthetically through the movement of our bodies. Information in the form of energy streams in simultaneously through all of our sensory systems, and then it explodes into this enormous collage of what this present moment looks like, what this present moment smells like and tastes like, what it feels like, and what it sounds like. I am an energy being connected to the energy all around me through the consciousness of my right hemisphere. We are energy beings connected to one another through the consciousness of our right hemispheres as one human family. And right here, right now, we are brothers and sisters on this planet, here to make the world a better place. And in this moment, we are perfect, we are whole, and we are beautiful. My left hemisphere, our left hemisphere, is a very different place. Our left hemisphere thinks linearly and methodically. Our left hemisphere is all about the past, and it's all about the future. Our left hemisphere is designed to take that enormous collage of the present moment and start picking out details, and more details about those details. It then categorizes and organizes all that information, associates it with everything in the past we've ever learned, and projects into the future all of our possibilities. And our left hemisphere thinks in language. It's that ongoing brain chatter that connects me and my internal world to my external world. It's that little voice that says to me, hey, you got to remember to pick up bananas on your way home. I need them in the morning. It's that calculating intelligence that reminds me when I have to do my laundry. But perhaps most important, it's that little voice that says to me, I am. I am. And as soon as my left hemisphere says to me, I am, I become separate. I become a single, solid individual, separate from the energy flow around me and separate from you. And this is a portion of my brain that I lost on the morning of my stroke. On the morning of the stroke, I woke up to a pounding pain behind my left eye. And it was the kind of pain, caustic pain, that you get when you bite into ice cream. And it just gripped me, and then it released me. And then it just gripped me, and then it released me. And it was very unusual for me to ever experience any kind of pain, so I thought, okay, I'll just start my normal routine. So I got up and I jumped onto my cardio glider, which is a full body, full exercise machine. And I'm jamming away on this thing, and I'm realizing that my hands look like primitive claws grasping onto the bar. And I thought, that's very peculiar. And I looked down at my body, and I thought, whoa, I'm a weird-looking thing. And it was as though my consciousness had shifted away from my normal perception of reality, where I'm the person on the machine having the experience, to some esoteric space where I'm witnessing myself having this experience. And it was all very peculiar, and my headache was just getting worse, so I get off the machine, and I'm walking across my living room floor, and I realize that everything inside of my body has slowed way down. And every step is very rigid and very deliberate. There's no fluidity to my pace, and there's this constriction in my area of perception, so I'm just focused on internal systems. And I'm standing in my bathroom getting ready to step into the shower, and I could actually hear the dialogue inside of my body. I heard a little voice saying, okay, you muscles, you got to contract, and you muscles, you relax. And then I lost my balance, and I'm propped up against the wall. And I looked down at my arm, and I realized that I can no longer define the boundaries of my body. I can't define where I begin and where I end, because the atoms and the molecules of my arm blended with the atoms and molecules of the wall. And all I could detect was this energy. And I'm asking myself, what is wrong with me? What is going on? And in that moment, my brain chatter, my left hemisphere brain chatter, went totally silent. Just like someone took a remote control and pushed the mute button. Total silence. And at first I was shocked to find myself inside of a silent mind. But then I was immediately captivated by the magnificence of the energy around me. And because I could no longer identify the boundaries of my body, I felt enormous and expansive. I felt at one with all the energy that was, and it was beautiful there. And then all of a sudden, my left hemisphere comes back online, and it says to me, hey, we got a problem, we got to get some help. And I'm going, oh, I got a problem. So it's like, okay, I got a problem. But then I immediately drifted right back out into the consciousness, and I affectionately refer to this space as La La Land. But it was beautiful there. Imagine what it would be like to be totally disconnected from your brain chatter that connects you to the external world. So here I am in this space, and my job and any stress related to my job, it was gone. And I felt lighter in my body. And imagine all of the relationships in the external world and any stressors related to any of those, they were gone. And I felt this sense of peacefulness. And imagine what it would feel like to lose 37 years of emotional baggage. Oh, I felt euphoria. It was beautiful there. And then again, my left hemisphere comes online, and it says, hey, you've got to pay attention. We've got to get help. And I'm thinking, I got to get help. I got to focus. So I get out of the shower, and I mechanically dress, and I'm walking around my apartment, and I'm thinking, I got to get to work. Can I drive? And in that moment, my right arm went totally paralyzed by my side. Then I realized, oh my gosh, I'm having a stroke. And then the next thing my brain says to me is, wow, this is so cool. scientists have the opportunity to study their own brain from the inside out. And then it crosses my mind, but I'm a very busy woman. I don't have time for a stroke. It's like, okay, I can't stop the stroke from happening, so I'll do this for a week or two, and then I'll get back to my routine. Okay, so I got to call help. I got to call work. I couldn't remember the number at work. So I remembered in my office I had a business card with my number on it. So I go into my business room, and I pull out a 3-inch stack of business cards, and I'm looking at the card on top, and even though I could see clearly in my mind's eye what my business card looked like, I couldn't tell if this was my card or not, because all I could see were pixels. And the pixels of the words blended with the pixels of the background and the pixels of the symbols, and I just couldn't tell. And then I would wait for what I call a wave of clarity. And in that moment, I would be able to reattach to normal reality. And I could tell, that's not the card, that's not the card, that's not the card. It took me 45 minutes to get 1 inch down inside of that stack of cards. In the meantime, for 45 minutes, the hemorrhage is getting bigger in my left hemisphere. I do not understand numbers. I do not understand a telephone, but it's the only plan I have. So I take the phone pad and I put it right here. I take the business card, I put it right here, and I'm matching the shape of the squiggles on the card to the shape of the squiggles on the phone pad. But then I would drift back out into La La Land and not remember if when I come back if I'd already dialed those numbers. So I had to wield my paralyzed arm like a stump and cover the numbers as I went along and push them so that as I would come back to normal reality, I'd be able to tell, yes, I've already dialed that number. Eventually, the whole number gets dialed, and I'm listening to the phone, and my colleague picks up the phone, and he says to me, "Roo." And I think to myself, oh my gosh, he sounds like a golden retriever. And so I say to him, clear in my mind, I say to him, this is Jill, I need help. And what comes out of my voice is, "Woo, woo, woo." And I think, oh my gosh, I sound like a golden retriever. So I didn't know that I couldn't speak or understand language until I tried. So he recognizes that I need help, and he gets me help. And a little while later, I'm riding in an ambulance from one hospital across Boston to Mass General Hospital. And I curl up into a little fetal ball. And just like a balloon with the last bit of air just right out of the balloon, I just felt my energy lift and I felt my spirit surrender. And in that moment, I knew that I was no longer the choreographer of my life. And either the doctors rescue my body and give me a second chance at life, or this was perhaps my moment of transition. When I woke later that afternoon, I was shocked to discover that I was still alive. When I felt my spirit surrender, I said goodbye to my life, and my mind was now suspended between two very opposite planes of reality. Stimulation coming in through my sensory systems felt like pure pain. Light burned my brain like wildfire, and sounds were so loud and chaotic that I could not pick a voice out from the background noise, and I just wanted to escape. Because I could not identify the position of my body in space, I felt enormous and expansive, like a genie just liberated from her bottle. And my spirit soared free like a great whale gliding through a sea of silent euphoria. Nirvana. I found nirvana. And I remember thinking there's no way I would ever be able to squeeze the enormousness of myself back inside this tiny little body. But then I realized, but I'm still alive. I'm still alive, and I have found nirvana. And if I have found nirvana and I'm still alive, then everyone who is alive can find nirvana. And I pictured a world filled with beautiful, peaceful, compassionate, loving people who knew that they could come to this space at any time and that they could purposely choose to step to the right of their left hemispheres and find this peace. And then I realized what a tremendous gift this experience could be. What a stroke of insight this could be to how we live our lives. And it motivated me to recover. 2.5 weeks after the hemorrhage, the surgeons went in and they removed a blood clot the size of a golf ball that was pushing on my language centers. Here I am with my mama, who's a true angel in my life. It took me 8 years to completely recover. So, who are we? We are the life force power of the universe with manual dexterity and 2 cognitive minds. And we have the power to choose moment by moment who and how we want to be in the world. Right here, right now, I can step into the consciousness of my right hemisphere where we are. I am the life force power of the universe. I am the life force power of the 50 trillion beautiful molecular geniuses that make up my form, at one with all that is. Or I can choose to step into the consciousness of my left hemisphere, where I become a single individual, a solid, separate from the flow, separate from you. I am Dr. Jill Bolte-Taylor, intellectual, neuroanatomist. These are the we inside of me. Which would you choose? Which do you choose? And when? I believe that the more time we spend choosing to run the deep inner peace circuitry of our right hemispheres, the more peace we will project into the world, and the more peaceful our planet will be. And I thought that was an idea worth spreading. Thank you.
I'm back. And let's come back to our brain pictures and just kind of discuss a little bit about what her experience was with regards to how she described the fact that her left hemisphere was completely offline. The left hemisphere, as I mentioned before that video, contains our language centers, which I was about to show you a picture of, and then it disappeared on me. The language centers, which I identified as Broca's area and Wernicke's area, and those are that communicate by something called the arcuate fasciculus. Wernicke's, again, is the understanding of language. Broca's area is the motor pathway, the ability to execute language in the form of speaking. And if those language centers don't work, then you can't understand words. And she described looking at, little index cards and seeing pixelated images, and she had to match the pixelated images with other pixelated images on her phone so she could dial a phone number. And I feel like that is where we were back in the days of Lucifer, back 3,000 years before Christ. If you get into Steiner, he talks a little bit about that Luciferic type of time period. And then he talks of a shift that happened when Jesus was walking on the planet, and when he talks about the mystery at Golgotha. And this is when Jesus either was full of that Christ impulse or understood that he was the Christ. I don't quite know the details of it all, but I mean, Jesus may have known that he was the Christ much earlier than that. But then after that, there was again this balance to the other side, and that's where we are today. So when you look at like a teeter-totter, you've got Lucifer on one side, you have Ahriman on the other side, and Jesus should be in the middle. Where has humanity been? I mean, have we been through all of this before and now we're experiencing humanity's decline? And I do believe, we are at a very low point in where we are as humans compared to where I think our potential is. And, that low point of allowing the psychopaths in government and the psychopaths that control the psychopaths in government, allowing them to just basically take over every facet of freedom on our planet, of our ability to make a free will decision without having to check in and, scan a code and bow down. I mean, it's the authoritarianism is just so profound. And it's really sad that people cannot see it. So many humans just kind of accept this as the norm. Like, oh, it's normal to pay taxes. It's normal to have to listen to what this authoritarian says. Oh, Biden said this. I mean, I was in a faculty meeting just the other day and they're talking about Biden's new whatever. And why are we just blindly accepting what these people are telling us? And that's because we are on the accepting role of that psychopathic authoritarian. The image that I had shared with you, when you have an imbalance between the two hemispheres, you end up on the side of the psychopath who is left hemisphere controlled and will follow a law, even if it's an immoral law, to the point that they will kill somebody else. I mean, think about what the psychopaths in the police in countries like Australia, where they were just beating people, and even in China, where they're starving people to death, in Shanghai. And when you accept that because you think the authoritarians have some sort of privilege to be able to do this, then you are blind on the right hemisphere. You're imbalanced on the right hemisphere, and you are you're willing to take that abuse. So I think maybe let's talk about solutions now, because I really do think there is a way to get out of this. And I think it does have to do with a little bit of what Jill Bolte Taylor mentioned in that video. And taking us back even to how we begin our lives, not even as babies, but even in utero. I mean, we have to really take it back a bit and start from scratch if we want to create a human species. If we want to, I shouldn't say create, if we want to foster a human species that is balanced, and we can have the best of both worlds. We can understand and identify things that, that's kind of what the ego is, right? Our ego is left hemisphere, I believe, connected. And our ego protects us. It's the left hemisphere that can say, hey, that red truck running right towards us, maybe we should get out of the way. The right hemisphere might look at the color of the red truck and think, oh, you're so beautiful. That's a beautiful color of red. Left hemisphere is like, hey, buddy, come on. Get yourself out of danger's way. So what does balance look like? Well, like I said, it begins in youth. It begins when we're very young. I think we need to scrap this whole educational system we have today. And, there used to be more focus on the arts in grade school. I remember I had a friend where I used to live when I lived in Illinois, and she had a young daughter, and she was a huge proponent of arts in the school. And she was very much upset when they were removing all of these programs because of budget. And they removed the art program, and then they removed the music program. And so basically all the kids had were sports and, reading, writing, and arithmetic. Because that's what our society values. And yes, society does value the arts. I think, look at the music industry, but that's been corrupted. I mean, look at even acting in Hollywood. I mean, look into what Hollywood is. Jordan Maxwell talks about the Hollywood and its occult connections. All of this has been taken over by these psychopaths in this unnatural system we live in. But again, coming back to what Jill Bolte Taylor described when she was completely within her right hemisphere. And I don't think it's healthy to be completely in your right hemisphere. Again, when you're completely in your right hemisphere, you're not seeing the truck heading at you 90 miles per hour, and you're not getting out of the way of that truck. So you do need the left hemisphere for that. But the right hemisphere, when she described that experience, when she's riding in the ambulance and she describes, just like a balloon, letting go of that last bit of air, her soul, her essence, her consciousness was soaring like a whale in this, what she described as a sea of euphoria. And you had the massive amount of all of creation at your disposal, and you're just feeling all of it, and you can go anywhere. Do we take the time to allow for that expansion? Mark Passio, when I first came across his podcast, and I started with podcast number 1, which he recommends that all listeners do. And I recommend that as well, because it is a journey in how he unfolds this information. But he does go through, as part of that sequence of his sharing knowledge with us all, various other modalities that can help us expand our consciousness. He gets into, discussions of psychedelics and other types of modalities. These are things that I think we should take a closer look at and more serious look at. With psychedelics, I think we do have to, as with anything, really find a way that we are not going to allow ourselves to be overwhelmed by it. And what do I mean by that? I mean, obviously, any kind of substance you take in, is it natural? That's first and foremost. And I'm a big proponent of natural psychedelics as opposed to the isolated chemistry, like the LSD isolated from the natural source from which it came. And I don't know where it came from. I think it might have been completely a chemical manufacturing plant. I don't know the history of LSD, I'll be honest with you. But let's pretend that it came from a plant. Well, is it better to take the isolated chemistry or to, consume the whole plant? That's why a lot of people like marijuana, because in marijuana you have the whole plant, or you can do components of that, taking parts out of it, like the CBD or the THC. I think, honestly, it's better for the whole plant to be used, because when you have the whole plant, the whole herb, the whole organism, you're getting the richness of all of the different connections of that. And anyway, these are tools that we have at our disposal. And herbs fall into that category too. I mean, the plants that are all around us. I've been reading a lot of books on herbs lately, and I remember one book, the person wrote that the herbs that grow around you, The herbs that grow in your backyard are usually there because of the symbiotic relationships humans have with these herbs. And this is again getting us into that right hemisphere as opposed to the left. Left hemisphere doesn't want to know about the connections we have with plants. Left hemisphere is, I have a headache, I'm just going to go to the drugstore and get some Tylenol. That's a very mechanized way of looking at health. You have a pain, you got a pill for that. Well, with right hemisphere, you're going to open your mind, your consciousness, your sensory experience. What do you feel attracted to? What do you notice when you're outside? And I guarantee something will catch your eye. And if you dismiss it, you're missing out on what the true beauty of that connection is. And this is part of what it means to be human. Unfolding that connection, developing that connection. So in the book I was reading, the herbology book that I was reading, the author writes that when you're walking out in nature, pay attention to what catches your eye. And if it's a plant, if it's an herb, it could be an herb. If you can identify it and understand its role, it could be something that could heal you, something that could enrich you. And you want to be careful with herbs. As somebody who is studying to become a master herbalist, there are herbs that can be dangerous to consume. And you have to look for mimicry when you're learning plant identification. If you're doing an herb walk or a plant walk, you need to finally understand and appreciate the nuances of all of these different beautiful plants and be able to differentiate one plant from another. Maybe we can pull up some beautiful plant images as we're discussing this to further enrich our understanding of these herbs. Let's see if I can find some of these pictures here. Here we go. But yeah, the plants and the human, and all animals on this planet, not just humans. The animals are already very much in the now. They're connected to, I think they have a more balanced view, and they're more in that right hemisphere, oftentimes. I think cats especially. Cats seem to be very psychedelic with the way they interact with their environment. Sometimes I'll just sit there and watch my cat, and he seems to be like he just, took a hit of acid or something, and he's just on LSD, just kind of spaced out. I had a roommate when I was in grad school, and she had a cat that lived with us that I think abused catnip. Catnip, by the way, very great herb for humans. It's not just an herb for cats. Cats do like it quite a bit, but it's great for pain. Catnip could be coupled with other herbs like feverfew for headaches and whatnot. So making a tea of that or a tincture. But yeah, when you're out in nature, one thing I share with my students to try to help them understand some of the differences between the left hemisphere of the brain and the right hemisphere of the brain is I tell them a story of two friends walking and hiking in the woods. And one of the friends is right hemisphere dominant. The other friend is left hemisphere dominant. And I'm describing their experiences during this hike. The left hemisphere dominant friend during the hike is identifying everything he sees. He's identifying the genus and the species of every plant, of every organism, of every animal. He's, articulating words and labels for everything. The right hemisphere dominant friend, on the other hand, is just taking in all of the sensory experience of that hike. Feeling the sun, smelling the fresh flowers and other smells of nature. Feeling the earth below his feet. Maybe touching the bark on a tree, or feeling the softness of a petal. That's right hemisphere. And we don't really appreciate those sensory experiences as much because we're pulled oftentimes so much into the left hemisphere. So as a teacher, What can I do to help with this balance? And I think that's something that all educators need to look at. What can we do when we're sharing knowledge? And I mean, even my friends that are on the One Great Work Network, what can we all do during the sharing of knowledge where we can help to balance the two hemispheres of our brain? Because by adding more of a sensory experience and creating holistic now in what we are experiencing, you're stepping into that right hemisphere. So it is good to have both, and there is a requirement for both. Without both, we wouldn't be able to survive on this planet. And how is it that we can use our exploration and development of the right hemisphere to elevate ourselves out of where we are today? I mean, some of us might have to do this out of necessity, with the way things could be going. We could be on a path where you're either going along with what the control system is offering you, and keeping things copacetic, keeping your 9-to-5 job and, going to the grocery store and the doctor, your allopathic physician, keeping all of that, which is not healthy. I mean, a lot of us are bitching about, we want to go back to the way things used to be. And I think a lot of us have a false sense of security, thinking we are getting back. But, as I was explaining to my mom earlier today, once any government puts a law into place, they have that at their disposal at all times. So even though, some judge said, hey, you don't have to wear masks on planes anymore, and, a lot of these mask restrictions are being lifted, or not restrictions, but mask mandates are being, lifted. There are other places. I mean, look at the state of Rhode Island. I mean, they're going, balls to the wall with this whole mandate of people need to be injected with poison. And this is crazy. This is just literally insane to think anything allopathic, suppressive, isolated chemistry, isolated from the whole. That's what we're injecting into this magnificent, miraculous human form that each of us has the ability to experience the world with. I mean, when we're watching Jill Bolte Taylor describe her immersion into the right hemisphere, you could see in her expression, I could feel in her expression the beauty that she was witnessing in that moment in time. Back in 2013, I was doing a shamanic journey, not with anything, psychedelic or ayahuasca or anything like this. I was actually just doing this in my bedroom, listening to headphones of repetitive shamanic drumming. I was trying to put myself into a trance, and I had been reading a book by I can't remember. I think her name is Sandra. I can't think of her last name. Sandra something. But she is, she's a woman that writes about shamanism. And she was sharing kind of a set of activities you could do to kind of just use the repetitive drumming experience to put yourself into a shamanic trance. And I had been trying that for several weeks. I was listening to the drumming, and I was, you have to kind of envision, because in shamanism, and the shamans very much in the right hemisphere, they know how to connect and tap into that power of the right hemisphere. The shamans, when they go on their journeys to retrieve information, to find a healing plant for somebody they're helping, they go into one of three worlds. There is the lower world, there is the upper world, and there is the world kind of the middle ground world, but it's still in a different realm. It's not, what we're currently experiencing. And so Sandra, I think it's Sandra Ingram, that's what her name is, Sandra Ingram. She, in her, and I'll just share the directions with you. I'm not reading them verbatim because I don't have the book in front of me, but I remember it because this was an incredibly profound experience that I had witnessed, that I had gone through. So you are listening to shamanic drumming. You can just get shamanic drumming on, any type of free online audio. And, or, if you go to like a shamanic kind of class, often the people in the room will actually be drumming, right? Using handheld drums and whatnot, or other types of devices to create a repetitive sound. But anyway, you're listening to the shamanic drumming, and while you're listening, you are imagining, you're finding a place that you're familiar with. So she says, something in your yard, in your maybe nearby park, something you're familiar with. And imagine you're going down into the earth. You're going down into the earth, into an underworld area. But anyway, she's describing that you find something familiar to what you can actually picture. You've seen it with your own eyes. So where I was living when I had this shamanic experience, I had 3 acres of land. I was living in the Midwest on 3 acres of land, and there was this little hole that was next to a cut down tree on my property, and I didn't cut the tree down. It was already cut when I bought the property. But there was a hole there, and I imagined that I was standing in front of that tree and that hole, and I went down into that hole, into the earth. And you have to have, clear focus while you're listening to the shamanic drumming. And as the shamanic drumming was continuing, Sandra Ingram says that you need to focus on energy coming in and out of your chest. So we're looking at the heart chakra here. So I imagine breathing in and out of my heart, focusing on just my heart. And all of my focus was on my heart, by the way. But we had to have one intention. There had to be a reason for us doing this shamanic journey. We are going in for answers. So I had a very clear question that I wanted to find an answer to. And all I simply wanted to know was who my power animal was. So I've gone down this hole. I'm in the lower world. I'm breathing in and out of my heart, focusing on my heart chakra. And I'm asking the question, who is my power animal? Show me my power animal. And with every breath in and out of my heart, that is my focus. Very, very focused. Not allowing other extraneous thoughts, worries, concerns enter into my brain. And that's the brain chatter Jill Bolte Taylor talked about. That mind chatter, that, having to, what you need to pick up at the store and chores you need to do and this person you need to call back. All of that left brain mind chatter we're asking to be turned off. And you're focusing, right hemisphere, focusing on the here and now, listening to the shamanic drumming, focusing on air coming in and out or energy coming in and out of your heart, and asking one very focused question. And it could be anything. I just picked power animal because at that time I was reading about power animals and I just wanted to know if I had a power animal and what it was. Now, let me just explain something. 2 years before this shamanic journey experience, I had lost my best friend. my dog. Her name was Lucky. And she had been with me through much of my adult life at that point. And this was back in 2013. She passed away in 2011. But losing her was so incredibly hard on me because I loved her so much. And I had a strong connection to her. And, it's very interesting how she came into my life and the bond we had, and just very incredible connection between her and I. And she was my guardian. I really believe that she was my guardian angel. And I needed a guardian angel during that time of my life. I think, saved me. But she was an interesting dog. Many people told me that they thought that she was part wolf. And, she didn't really bark. She did act more like a wolf than a dog. So she kind of looked like a German Shepherd Husky wolf, if I could describe her. So anyway, I want to provide that background because she had passed away in 2011 and it was 2013. And 2013, very interesting time, by the way. 2012, the end of the Mayan calendar. My whole life shifted, I'll tell you. I mean, something happened in 2012. Something big happened in 2012. This could be a whole other discussion. But, my brother fell 6 stories in 2012. Lived. He's still alive today, but he lived. He fell off a 6-story parking garage onto the street. And we thought he was going to die for sure, but he survived. And what's really crazy is that he has shared with me his experience of death. And I'm not going to go into all of that because I don't know, how much he wants me to share, or even if he even knows I do this live stream event. But, he said he saw hell. And he also, while in the hospital, he told me he saw dead people walking around. Anyway, so that's crazy, right? And then that was an event, a tumultuous and life-changing event for him, for sure. But for me, 2012 represented a time when I was in a 12-year relationship that had just ended. And I felt like something happened to me that might have started directing me down a path that I had otherwise would not have taken. That's the best way I can describe it. And I don't want to judge the path that I was on at that time as good or bad. It just was. It was something that my soul, because I was starting to connect more with something else. Again, why I was going into these shamanic studies and wanting to learn about these altered state of consciousness. And I was more attracted to getting to these altered states of consciousness by other means than, smoking or drinking anything that would put me into that. Not that I am opposed to that. And for a while, I was curious about doing something like ayahuasca. When I lived in Seattle, Washington, I had friends that, had gone to one of those events. And I remember one of my friends, he was just blown away by it. I mean, he just was kind of on cloud 9 for weeks afterwards, after that ayahuasca experience. And I was very curious about it, but I've never done ayahuasca. My shamanic journey was just based on focus and drums and breathing through my heart and connecting with my heart chakra. That's how I got through it. So, again, it just 2013, just because of that time period. And I think maybe for the planet, maybe for all humanity, 2012 did represent the end of something. We all thought the end of the Mayan calendar would have been the end of the world. But it was the end of something. And I heard Max Egan talk a little bit about this, and I've heard other people talk about this as well. What if the world did end in 2012? And we're in kind of a simulation or some kind of altered reality? Who knows? I mean, consciousness is just amazing, and we don't have all of the answers. But anywho, let me get back to my shamanic journey experience. So I went down the hole in my yard that I was envisioning, and at some point, I was put in a different reality. I remember walking in some woods and seeing a little cottage, opening the door of the cottage, and feeling like it was all very familiar. I know I have like a YouTube video from this time. I should play it. Maybe I should look it up really quick. And I can just play this for you. Because this was right after this shamanic journey. I turned 40 yesterday. I spent the day at the vet with my dog Lucy. She was in an accident, but she's okay. Okay, let me turn this up a little bit. My volume is way too low. 1 second. 1 second. Let's try this again. Okay. I did a lot of Reiki with her the day before my birthday and on my birthday. I want to share with you an experience I had about, I guess, almost 2 weeks ago. It was on April 13th. No, it wasn't. It was on April 14th. April 14th. And this is something that has changed my life. And I can't explain how it's changed my life other than the fact that it has shown me what pure love is. I felt an energy so amazing that it can be described as love, universal love. I can't put a word on it. It was an amazing, amazing experience. I have been having a hard time finding my place lately. And maybe it was something about my 40th birthday coming up, but I really started to look inward. And I wanted to let go of things that were numbing me, distracting me. Why is this going so close? Numbing me and distracting me. I wanted to kind of find my true self, be in alignment with my true self, and then somehow find what my soul's purpose is on this planet. So I started reading about shamanic journeying, and I tried it for a few weeks and nothing really happened. And then on April 14th, that morning, again, experience that was beyond any experience I have ever had. I used drumming to put me into the trance. Some people go into a trance or they enter into the shamanic journey doing other things, maybe using some sort of hallucinogen like ayahuasca. But I decided to use drumming. And it took me about an hour and a half, maybe a little less, but more than an hour, to finally enter into the lower world. And I'd like to point out that what helped me do this was, what's going on with this camera? What helped me do this was a book by Sandra Ingerman called Shamanic Journeying, A Beginner's Guide. And I went into the lower world, I believe, and I was in this house that I kind of recognized, but not really. I felt like I knew this house. And I felt this amazing energy kind of in my lower, pelvis. and it was just really strong and very powerful. And it felt like it needed to come out, and then slowly it started rising up and came up my belly into my chest. And then when it got to my chest, it just kind of poured out forcefully like a geyser, just all of this amazing energy. And my back arched, and this energy was just coming out of me, and it felt like amazing, just pure love. I can't describe it any other way. I just felt amazingly loved by the universe. I felt like I had always been loved. I had always been taken care of, and that experience was just amazing. And it took a few minutes, maybe 5-10 minutes, as the love was just pouring out. Again, like a geyser, forcing itself out, arching my back. And this love was in me, and it just poured out. And then after that, I saw my power animal. I am not quite sure if I should share who my power animal is, because I'd like to ask my power animal if that's okay for me to do.
Mm-hmm.
But my power animal was staring right at me after this gushing love experience. Then I saw my power animal staring me in the eyes, and again, I felt loved. I felt like this spirit has been watching over me my whole life and loving me. It was so beautiful. I felt so connected. And then the power animal vanished, and then I saw my dog Lucky. Lucky had passed away in June of 2011. And she was staring at me and showing me again love. And that felt amazing. Just seeing Lucky and connecting with her. I miss her so much. I love her. And she was there, and she's always been with me, and I feel like she's been with me my entire life. Maybe the power animal was in Lucky's body when she was on this planet, but they're both still with me. After this experience, after I woke up, I just kind of felt amazing. I felt loved. I felt on cloud nine. I wanted to get out in nature, and I went on a hike with my dogs right after that. And I have since then just really wanted to kind of give myself time to adjust to this new found knowledge that there is love out there watching over me and in me and from me. And I don't know how to share this with anybody, but that's what it is. It's love. Love is the answer. Love is what it all is about. I have not been able to journey like I did on April 14th. I've been trying every day since, and I really want to reconnect with Lucky and my power animal. But I won't give up. In fact, I think I was pretty lucky to have this experience after having just trying to journey for a few weeks. Most people, it takes much longer for them to get to this state. So I'll keep trying. I'm not going to give up. But that's why I haven't really been doing too many YouTube videos, because I've been very introspective lately. And if anybody's interested in me sharing more about this, I will. But until then, hopefully I'll have more journeys to share. And all I can say is love. Just love. You're love, I'm love, we're all love. And we're put on this planet, I believe, so that the earth can experience human form, because we come from the earth. And we are loving, just earth beings. And we're here to share something special that only we can share. Each one of us is so special and unique. We all have a gift. We have to find that gift. So get rid of the things that are distracting you. Don't let anything prevent you from finding your gift that this planet needs, because you were put on this planet for a reason. And it's to express that love that's inside of you and share it with others. So anyway, I'm 40 now, and that's my story. All right, folks. So yeah, that was my shamanic journey experience. I don't know if I have other videos where I shared anything like that. Yeah, most of my other videos were yeah. I have some old school, anarchy videos though, back from the day. Back from when I first found, this is also the time when I first came across Mark Passio, so it's a very interesting time in my life. It wasn't too long after that shamanic journey experience where I came across Mark Passio and I was really getting into his work. And yeah, so I don't want to digress on that too much. Let's come back to this. Here we go. I think there is something to be said for connecting with that state of being where we are very focused. And, meditation is great, but, also, as Mark Passio puts it, that streetwise spirituality, having your feet on the ground and you're using that connection. You're using that connection that you have created with this is really loud. We're using the connection we have created with spirit and with earth to find a solution. And I think, nature really is trying to help us find a solution for all of this. Because the planet needs us as much as we need the planet. And yet the powers that should not be, they're trying to screw up both humanity and this beautiful planet. They act like they're all about the environment. They're acting like, we have to do it for the climate. And it's all bullshit because they're speaking out of a place of imbalanced, psychopathic mentality. That's where governments are. That's where the powers that should not be reside. And they have taken the occult knowledge that if you listen to Mark Passio's work from video number 1, from his very first podcast, and you watch them in order, you'll learn a lot about the symbolism and everything that they use to their advantage, not for the advantage of all, but for the advantage of the few elite, those few elite that are in power. As you were listening to that shamanic drumming that is on the screen right now, that drumming, it's monotonous, and that's pretty good. I would, if you're going to do something like this at home and try to, maybe you're reading the book by Sandra Ingerman and trying to use just focus and intent and will to help you experience these other worlds. I like just the pure drum, just the monotonous drum, not even with, the flute is nice, but, the pure just drumming, the pure monotonous drumming, I think is a more direct and beneficial way to get yourself into that altered state of reality. And these realities are at our disposal anytime we want to. We just need to tap into, again, that right hemispheric type of option we all have. Again, as Jill Bolte Taylor said in that TED Talk video, stepping to the right, of your corpus callosum, into that right hemisphere, tapping into that aspect of our brain which does not identify everything as a identity, or I'm sorry, that doesn't make sense. It does not label everything. It's not associated for many of us with language. So our right hemisphere is purely taking in the sensory experience, and it's more in the present, in the now. And it's great to be in the now. It's also great to be in the left hemisphere where we can describe and connect. The left hemisphere, though, you're connecting with something you're separate from. In the right hemisphere, you are part of, you are one with that experience. So these two different realities are quite, they're part of the duality, I guess, that we have in this experience of our lives on this world. It is always kind of fun to watch things burn. I used to have a fire pit on my old property too, the property where I had the shamanic journey experience. So I do miss that property quite a bit. I wish I would have never left that place. It was a great place, and it was a bad decision for me to leave. Reflecting on all of the changes again that have happened, and you can probably come up with your own list of what has happened to you since 2012, since the end of the Mayan calendar. I was really hoping that December of 2021 was when all of this would end. And maybe it did. Maybe we stepped back into something else. I don't know. I mean, I was in the middle of this pandemic. And I will say that the pandemic has strengthened my desire to get out of this system. I kind of became more connected to not connected, that's not the best word. I was really passionate about getting out of the system and doing my own thing, and I still am. My own thing being focusing more on providing education for, natural health professionals. Last year I was doing a lot of that with Dr. Robert Morse, and I still am going to. I'm just kind of in a little slump right now because of many things going on in my life. But yeah, I really wanted to make that my life, and I wanted to grow my own. I'm growing my own food, and I am growing my herbs and making my own medicine. I'm doing all of those things, but it's very time consuming when I also work full time. And this semester has been crazy because I have a brand new class that I'm teaching this semester. Developing a brand new online class takes a lot of work, and so it doesn't leave me with a lot of extra time. And plus I'm studying to become a master herbalist, so there's that. And it's trying to balance it all and go forth with what I'm passionate about. But, the thing that takes up the most of my time is my job. Well, in all honesty, I would say the dogs are, if not equal, they might be a little bit, I think they are a close second to my job, maybe a little bit more than my job, I don't know. I spend a lot of time on my animals, and I have special diets for all of them. They all eat a diet that is I don't know, my 16-year-old dog's diet is different from the other younger two dogs. So it's interesting. Maybe one of my live stream events I'll talk all about animal health care and what I do to keep my animals healthy. But I do kind of spoil them, probably excessively, so that's not good. Anyway, I hope this background is not too overwhelming in the recording, but it seems appropriate. I wish I was outside looking at a fire, a real fire, and I wish I was connected with other humans. I think that's the one thing that I've really have missed, and that's connecting with other humans. I haven't done a lot of that lately. I've connected with them virtually, but not in the physical presence of other humans. I mean, when the pandemic began, my whole college was teaching online. And then because of my inability to wear a mask without, wanting to put myself in harm's way with my breathing, I continued to teach remotely. And it's tough because the few times I go to campus for, faculty meetings or just, to get things out of my mailbox, things are different and people are, I guess it saddens me how so many of my colleagues really believe in these people ruling us or wanting to rule us. I am going to take a break for a minute because I have a dog at the backyard I have to let in. 1 second. Yeah, the dogs do take up a lot of my time. I will tell you that. They, letting them in, letting them out, feeding them. I mean, it's a lot of work. And I love doing it. It's just trying to balance everything in our world. And I don't know. I've become quite the hermit these days. Very. It's funny, I said I've become quite the hermit these days, and I turned my head and I looked at a picture that said the 7 Hermetic Principles. So am I a hermit in the essence of the Hermetic Principles? I don't know. I've been getting a lot of those types of experiences where I will think of something and see something that relates to it, like automatically. Relationship between human consciousness and natural law. And I know this is kind of small, but you can see the arrows. Mark Passio talks about the alignment of your thoughts, your emotions, and your actions. When all of those are aligned, we are on the path of expressing true will. So you can see in this first column, expression, the expression of thoughts as knowledge in the positive, ignorance in the negative. The expression of our emotions, sovereign on the positive aspect, confusion in the negative. And then of our actions, freedom in the positive, control in the negative. And then you look at the generative polarity. The generative principle is that aspect of creation. And what do we create? In the positive essence, love. In the negative, fear, unconsciousness. I wish I could make this bigger. Maybe I can try. Let's see. It's kind of interesting, the last row, manifestation of what we create. When we are in a positive expression of natural law, we create order in our own lives. And that's one thing that Mark Passio talks about. Internal monarchy, external anarchy. That internal monarchy is order in our own life. And really simplifying our lives is one way to build up that order through, again, these positive aspects of our thoughts, our actions, and our emotions. So through expressing and accepting truth, the knowledge of truth, and internally, as we become more knowledgeable of the occult, and I think it's good if every one of us could get the arc drive from Mark Passio. Go to his website, What on Earth is Happening. I need to get that. I had gotten a download of it, but I don't think I have the one that is the newest one that has everything on it. So I want to get the new one. Because there are tons of videos and other things that Mark has come across to build up his own knowledge of what he shares in his weekly podcast about natural law and what we can do to raise human consciousness, to end slavery. But anyway, through the knowledge and acceptance of truth, we become sovereign individuals, and that is expressed as freedom. When we don't, the negative expression of all of these three, ignorance, so that is not knowing the occult truths, the occult knowledge. We become confused, that's internal anarchy. And when you're confused internally, which is what they try to create, confusion. I mean, look at what they're doing with children. Isn't that creating confusion? Sharing with them all of these different genders and how many different types of genders are there, and making children question their own gender. I mean, is this even a time for children? Would children naturally look for anything about gender? I don't think that was even on my mind when I was 5 or 6 or 7 years old. And children are naturally curious about many things, but I don't think gender is one of them. And so what the public indoctrination camps, which are funded by government, which is mind control, they are bringing forth confusion to our children, which puts them into a state of internal anarchy. Not internal monarchy, not being a sovereign being, but internal anarchy. And that makes those individuals more easily controlled. And when they're more easily controlled, they're controlled by an external monarchy. We, as anarchists, want external anarchy. External anarchy is the anarchistic, if I can say this word, that's the kind of expression, the external expression we want to create. But you have to be an internal sovereign, an internal monarch. Otherwise, true chaos is what the government has brought us. True chaos is what we're experiencing right now. People say anarchy is chaos. No, it's not. It's just the opposite. External anarchy, internal monarchy is what we all should put forth as our first principle of what's most important. Principles have to come first. And developing just a daily ritual, a daily habit that will help to foster that type of living. Not being afraid of creating that simple life for yourself. But also making time, again, to find balance between the two hemispheres. And I love being an educator. But what I would love to do more than that is go on more nature walks with students. And being out in nature, feeling and smelling and sensing and tasting that which nature is sharing with us. And then reflecting upon that connection. That's how the shamans did it. At least I think. I don't know. I wasn't there. But I think that's how the shamans would have done it in my mind's eye. Of how I think that, and this is all left brain what I'm sharing with you right now. But when I envision a shaman who was a very important person for the people, the shaman had the answers. The shaman knew where to go to find water, to find food. The shaman knew what herb that this ill person needed to allow the body to release that which it was holding on to, that toxicity it was carrying. And perhaps the toxicity was a physical toxin, maybe it was an emotional toxin, maybe it was a spiritual toxin. We don't even look at the spiritual aspects in any of our healing modalities. I mean, at least not the Western allopathically oriented modalities. There are modalities of healing where the spirit is very much connected with healing overall. But that's what I wanted to talk with you all about today. Taking a little bit of a break from all of the discussions we've been having about herbs, which herbs are great. Herbs are just magical healers. And they're whole foods. They're just nourishment. Herbs have energetics, and when you learn the herbal energetics, you can learn how to use the plant most appropriately and create a balanced, herbal tincture of multiple herbs that work together. But I'm going to wrap it up here. I only have a few minutes left. I will see you all next week. And hopefully I will, in the future, have more engaging live stream events. I will be joining the How to Be the True Media that Mark Passio is going to be giving that course. You can get that off his website. Maybe I will show it really quick. How to Be the True Media. Let's see if I can pull it up let's get this into view. So yeah, for those of you that might be interested in signing up for this class, How to Become the True Media, it does begin in July. It's on Monday nights, Eastern Time, starting at 8. And I'm excited to really learn about and to, develop the skills to help me share what I have come to know about truth and anarchy and what I'm still learning, and hopefully to connect with other like-minded individuals. I like these live streams or what I'm doing right now with you all, but I want something that's more, where I'm connecting with more people. And I know I'm not really advertising this Friday night live stream that I do, but maybe I can learn those skills and connect with more people and make it a more fruitful experience and have people call in or even, connect via Zoom or whatever modality we choose. So again, I'm going to wrap it up. Check this out. I hope you all have a great week, and I'll see you next Friday.